In the 1990s, there were several popular sports cars, but one of the most iconic and beloved sports cars of that era was the Nissan 300ZX. The Nissan 300ZX is an iconic sports car produced by the Japanese automaker Nissan. The 300ZX was part of Nissan's Z car series and was produced in two generations: the Z31 generation, 1983 to 1989, and the Z32 generation, 1989 to 2000, with the Z32 generation becoming especially well known. It all began with the Datsun 240Z, a perfect embodiment of a sports coupe. With relatively low weight, a decent amount of power, rear-wheel drive, and a design clearly inspired by its European and American competitors. Over time, the 240Z became progressively more luxurious, heavier, and larger. Not exactly what you'd want from a small, agile sports coupe. The Nissan 300ZX might be the most successful Z variant. Both rationally and emotionally, the Z32 was a standout. The 300ZX was stunningly beautiful. Not only that, but the car had a unique appearance. The front end was highlighted by the headlights that seamlessly followed the lines of the hood. There were two engine options available. A 3.0 V6 VG35 with 220 horsepower and 265 Nm. While this might not sound like a lot for a 3-liter engine, it was quite respectable for its time. However, what you really wanted was the 300ZX twin-turbo. Thanks to two Garrett turbochargers, this version had significantly more power under the hood, 300 horsepower and 380 Nm. This power delivery matched the car's looks perfectly. The show matched the go. With its relatively low weight, around 1,450 kilograms, it could accelerate from 0 to 100 km per hour in just over 5 seconds. The top speed was limited to 250 km per hour. Not only was the top speed limited, but the power output was as well. In Japan, the 300ZX had only 280 horsepower due to a gentleman's agreement, but the European version had more to offer. The interior also received attention. Admittedly, in the late 80s, interiors weren't a strong point for Japanese cars. Excessive use of hard plastic, gray fabrics, and simple styling didn't create a great atmosphere. With the 300ZX, Nissan made an effort to improve this. As it was a relatively compact two-seater, later, a four-seater with a longer wheelbase was introduced. The center console was made smaller and placed as far back as possible. To achieve a smaller center console, many buttons and controls had to be relocated. These found a new home on the instrument panel, where they were mounted like satellites on the sides. Surprisingly ergonomic. This arrangement allowed the driver's hands to stay close to the steering wheel and allowed them to keep their gaze forward. Adding to the spacious feeling of the 300ZX was the Targa roof. It consisted of a T-bar and two glass panels. This always provided an extra sense of space. Some versions had a fixed roof. Most of these are found in Japan, where the car was named Fairlady Z. Particularly, the American market loved the Targa top. However, there was demand for a version with a fully open roof. In collaboration with the American sunroof company, ASC, the 300ZX convertible was developed. ASC initially intended to create a fully convertible version, but to maintain the car's stiffness, the 300ZX retained a roll bar. There was also demand in America for a 300ZX with even more power. Texas-based Motorsport International aimed to address this demand. This was done with great care to preserve the car's original character. The result was the Nissan 300ZX SR71, named after a spy plane. The body kit was designed by Peter Brock, from Shelby, and built by Kaminari. The engine was upgraded with larger turbos, still from Garrett, and a range of HKS upgrades, pushing the output to 425 horsepower and 580 Nm. This clearly had an impact on performance. 0 to 100 km per hour in 4.6 seconds, 0 to 160 km per hour in under 10 seconds, and a top speed slightly over 300 km per hour. This creation is even more remarkable because its emissions were clean enough to comply with California regulations. The SR71 was quite expensive. Partly due to this, it wasn't a commercial success. The plan was to build 100 units per year, but that target was not achieved. Some sources mention 15 units, some even less. The Stillen variant performed better, the Nissan 300ZX SMZ. This one looked even more aggressive than the SR71. Unlike the SR71, you could purchase the 300ZX directly from selected dealers in America and Canada. The 300ZX was also mechanically enhanced, albeit less extremely. The output of 365 horsepower was still impressive, more than the Nismo 370Z has now, for instance. Performance lay between that of the regular 300ZX and the 300ZX SR71. The 0 to 60 miles per hour sprint now took about 5 seconds, and the top speed remained restricted. This wasn't odd, as top speed is generally less relevant in America. Over 100 units were sold. By 1996, it was over for the European and American markets, after a 6-year run. Due to the expensive yen, it was challenging to price the cars competitively. This was a challenge faced by all Japanese cars, as well as the gentleman's agreement regarding power output. While 280 horsepower was impressive for a long time, European and American manufacturers exceeded that mark in the 90s. However, the 300ZX continued to be produced in its home country until 2000. That's an 11-year career without significant facelifts. The Japanese variants were slightly different from the export models. For instance, there was a 300ZX or 2x2. This was the ideal car for a father with 2 kids in a hurry. This 300ZX had an extended wheelbase. Up front were 2 Recaro sport seats, while the back had a bench with leather upholstery. You could recognize the car by its aggressive body kit and the, optional, BBS wheels. In 2000, it was all over. Around 165,000 units were produced, with nearly 100,000 of them for export markets. Usually, when looking at Japanese cars, we focus on the technology, the inventiveness, the reliability, the potential for extracting much more power. This could have been true for the 300ZX if designer Toshio Yamashita weren't so stubborn. He disregarded Nissan's instructions and persisted with his vision. He had a concept of how a Japanese sports car could look. He accomplished this with a few tasteful ingredients: a recognizable face, timeless proportions, and an elegant design. It sounds strange, but it's true. One of the most beautiful sports cars of the 90s is simply a Nissan. That's all for today. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and share our channel for more amazing content about 90s cars and technology.